Okay, good morning. I'm Catherine Stusman. My pronouns are she, they. And I'm a deaf interpreter where you are. And I was born and raised in Buffalo. But I became deaf at the age of 7. And then we have a large family. A large deaf family. On both sides. And I've been doing interpreting work for about 10 years, but before that, I was working human sources. But then I got pretty burnt out, so I went ahead and started with interpreting instead. I mean, both work.
I do see your signing style changes when you monitor the interpreters. So perhaps you might want to dig deeper into that, but maybe if you just want to sign, and then we can talk about it afterwards, up to you.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. No. Well, it's interesting because with the interpreter, there's some parts, specific words, I didn't really say those with the clarification there, but at the same time, you're definitely right, I am adjusting things like that. So, yeah. Because we can have to sign, but. So do you prefer, with my interpreting, do you prefer that it's more English order or stick with ASL?
Hello everyone, my name is Chris. My pronouns are they, them. I work over at the University of Rochester, and while these two work in patient care, I work with the deaf professional team. I've been working there since 2016, and between 2016 to 2024, I've worked with deaf medical students. And now that they've graduated, I work with graduate students. I'm a graduate student right now, interpreter here. So I reduced my work hours. I only work part-time. I still work with the deaf professionals and I'm very involved in the community, but I don't quite have one particular assignment that I always work.
You don't have one assignment? No.
Personally, I feel that ethically, I don't want to have a dual role as an interpreter while I'm in graduate school. So DI stands for designated interpreter. I was a designated interpreter for medical students for 7 years. Those students were MDs or PhD students. That's why I was there for so long. So in 2024, when they graduated, I shifted gears into going back to school myself. So to become a it takes a lot of work for deaf people to get used to different interpreters and interpreter styles. You know, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a virologist, those aren't quite my strong suits, so sometimes it can be nice for them. Their access depends on my ability to understand the content of their work. So if I don't plan to continue working with them, I feel it's not quite fair to ask them to educate me and then just kind of leave them in the dust and change courses. So as a designated interpreter, I'm more willing to team with those designated interpreters who work with deaf professionals. So the designated interpreter role includes scheduling. A lot of interpreters in surgery rooms, they don't quite know how to operate in ER settings. You know, there's a lot of rules, don't touch this, don't touch that.
Well, and you also do admin work, right?
Right. And I prioritize preferred interpreters. I am the prioritized preferred interpreter because I'm their designated interpreter. So I really have to be careful and mindful of my schedule to accommodate whatever they need from me. So now, during my shift to graduate school, it's not quite fair of me to accept the responsibilities that they need because that commitment would be temporary, despite the fact that their work remains the same. Hey there. Sandra Bradley walked by.
Yep, so you're peeking.
So that means if I just all of a sudden leave them alone without a designated interpreter, they're kind of lost in the dust. They have to train a new interpreter, and that's not quite fair. So now I'm more of a secondary backup interpreter for the designated interpreters there. My background relating to teaming with deaf interpreters, often people imagine that professional deaf employees are bilingual people. And that they're not consumers of deaf interpreting services, that they only require hearing interpreter services. But in the past, sometimes I've gone to clinical testing and research. You know how the hospitals have consent forms or instructions, and to just give it to a deaf person, they might just kind of toss it out. They prefer that information in signed format where they can immerse themselves into it. I also feed deaf interpreters. Personally, I don't like to sign for feed because it feels very infantilizing, almost like I'm feeding a baby. Really, Catherine is the language expert here. I'm just the one giving the information. So that's my preferred sign. So back to the point. Back then I was working a lot, less so now. But during COVID, I would work in VER. University of Rochester, where they had press releases about COVID, you know, statistics, numbers, vaccine research, all that information was going out every day. And so U of R would typically hire a deaf interpreter whom I'd feed. So really, I prefer working with patients and feeding and with platform interpreting, whereas these two work more with patients.
Okay, so with me, my name is Jelaine Mack, and you guys, I think last week we already met, is that correct? Yeah, okay, so I don't need to go too much into my own background. Yep, right? Okay, yep, you know what I mean. Who knows? I'm just curious what your preferred time for with feeding. Feed, do you have other preference with that?
Anytime I choose a particular word for interpretation, it really depends on my audience. In a context like this, in an interpreting setting, everybody knows what feed means, so it's an appropriate word. If I use this sign for feed in relation to a deaf team, the hearing consumer won't quite understand what I mean. So in English, I might say, convey the message to the deaf interpreter. or I interpret the source to the deaf interpreter to then make it accessible to the deaf consumer. So really, it depends on the audience.
And then I want to add, with my role at the hospital, so I started working with the Deaf Wellness Center there. And a deaf therapist there. And one-on-one with counseling, the appointments, and the patients. And it was really kind of be more working with the professionals. So I really enjoyed that experience personally.
I really want to add and emphasize, it's such a neat thing to be able to work with deaf therapists who know ASL and who are deaf themselves. They've grown up signing. It really left an impression on me to see the collaboration and teamwork.
Well, and then doing that therapy work, they're able to focus on that work. There's less interpreting, and the communication is just super direct, which is really honestly makes the therapy appointment so much more effective. Is it all right if we meet all you guys?
Is our first motion?